Sometime during the latter half of 1808, something strange started happening to the skies above South America. First, in the mountains above Bogotá, Colombia, an astronomer named Francisco José de Caldas noticed the sun was beginning to fade. He wrote that the sky began to change and the sun had become overtaken by something he had never seen and couldn't explain. In his writings, he called it a transparent cloud, a strange haze that seemed to coat the sky in every direction. It wasn't smoke, it wasn't fog, and it didn't move. It lingered for weeks while the light continued to dim and the air turned cold. And yet, no one knew why. Thousands of miles south, in Lima, Peru, José Hipólito Unanue, a physician and naturalist, was watching the sunsets with growing unease. The normal colors he was used to seeing at sunset had changed into deep reds, eerie purples, and blazing oranges that lingered long after the sun was gone. Night after night, through January and February of 1809, the sky remained looking like it was on fire. For nearly 2 centuries, the mystery went unsolved. Then, in 2007, scientists drilling deep into Greenland and Antarctica discovered something buried in the ice. A sudden, massive spike in sulfate particles dating back to late 1808. A chemical fingerprint of the exact time in history, locked in the ice. This was volcanic material, proof of an enormous eruption that had launched sulfur into the stratosphere and dimmed the sun across the globe. Only, no one knows where it happened. Even now, no craters have been found. There is still no direct evidence of any such event. Just the fallout, sulfur in the ice, strange colors that were reportedly in the sky, and an unnatural global chill. In fact, by the time Mount Tambora erupted in 1815, unleashing the year without a summer, the planet was already cooling. The damage had already begun from something even bigger, and perhaps just as catastrophic. Theories have piled up over the years. Some say it happened deep in the Pacific, on an island now lost to rising seas. Others think it was hidden in the jungles of South America or Indonesia, but nothing has ever been proven. We now call it the Mysterious Eruption of 1809, a global event that had no eyewitnesses. We know an enormous volcanic eruption happened. We just don't know where. In the year 416, something happened in what is now Indonesia. Something massive, something violent, and for a long time, no one was quite sure what it was. The only clue comes from a Javanese chronicle, Pustaka Rajapurwa, written many centuries after the event. It tells of a mountain, Batawara, that erupted with fire, shaking the earth and turning the sky black. The land reportedly split, ash covered the ground, and when it was over, a new island had appeared in the sea, Krakatoa. For a long time, that story was dismissed as myth. A dramatic legend passed down through generations, a bit too poetic to be trusted as history. After all, there were no Roman records, no Chinese documents about it. Literally no mention of such a massive event anywhere outside Java. Then in 1883, Krakatoa erupted again, this time with a terrifying, world-shaking force. It was one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in recorded history. The explosion was heard thousands of miles away. It triggered tsunamis, destroyed coastlines, and altered weather across the globe. And in the aftermath, as scientists studied the geology of the island, they found something strange, signs of an even older eruption. This one had happened long before 1883. The evidence buried deep beneath the island pointed to a cataclysmic event, around the 5th century. Suddenly, that old story about Batawara didn't sound so far-fetched. If the chronicle was accurate, even loosely, then it meant an entire civilization may have witnessed Krakatoa's creation firsthand. Not as myth, but as memory. They would have saw the sea boil in front of their eyes, the ground break apart beneath their feet. And what they couldn't explain, they passed on the only way they could. In story form, through the generations. Some researchers now believe the eruption in 416 could have rivaled even Mount Tambora in 1815, maybe bigger. But with no widespread records, we're left with only pieces of folklore, ash, and an incomplete story in history. On the morning of May 19, 1780, people across New England woke up to something strange happening to the sun. At first, it was just a reddish haze, but by mid-morning, the light was already starting to fade. And by noon, it was gone. Not dimmed. Gone. Completely. In parts of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, day turned to night. Candles were lit in kitchens, people stopped what they were doing and stepped outside to see it for themselves. It wasn't just dark, it was eerie. The birds had stopped singing, frogs started croaking, Cows wandered back to their barns like it was evening, and roosters crowed as if the sun had risen again. In Ipswich, Massachusetts, everything fell quiet under that heavy sky. In Braintree, Abigail Adams wrote about a thick, smoky atmosphere and a darkness she had never experienced in her life. In Hartford, Connecticut, with panic in the air, Colonel Abraham Davenport refused to adjourn the state legislature. He told the room, "The day of judgment is either approaching or it is not. I choose to be found doing my duty." Outside it rained, but the rain was black. People collected water from barrels and found it coated with a greasy soot. Ash drifted onto rooftops and floated on rivers. Leaves were stained with charcoal. In some parts of New Hampshire, people said cinders fell like snow, stacking up 6 inches deep. Nobody knew what caused it. There were no volcanoes erupting, no eclipses, no comets or meteors. All they knew was that it was a spreading, unexplained darkness. Some thought it was a sign from God. Others said the end was coming. Most people just sat quietly, waiting for the sun to come back. And then, eventually, it did. It wasn't until 2007 that scientists finally found a clue. Tree ring data from faraway Ontario, Canada, in what's now Algonquin Provincial Park, showed scars, clear signs of massive wildfires during the spring of 1780. And when researchers paired that with old weather reports, diaries, and newspaper accounts from New England, the pieces seemed to come together. So now it's assumed the events of that day were caused by an enormous wildfire, burning in what was then untamed Canadian forest. The smoke would have been carried by wind over hundreds of miles. Combined with fog and low clouds, it covered the northeast United States. There was no judgment day, no eclipse, no forgotten volcano. Just smoke, and the quiet fear of a world that didn't yet know how far fire could travel. New England's dark day wasn't the end of the world, but for a few long hours, it felt like it. It was supposed to be an ordinary Sunday. April 2nd, 1978, on Bell Island, Newfoundland, a quiet patch of land off Canada's eastern coast. A place where people knew their neighbors, where life moved slow, and where a quiet morning meant just that. But just before noon, something happened that would echo through the island for decades. Without warning, a sudden, deafening blast tore through the sky. People as far as 60 miles away said they heard it, like a cannon fired straight into the air. On Bell Island, windows cracked, doors rattled, and the ground itself rumbled. And in the small farming village of Bickfordville, the Bickford family found themselves at the center of it. Their house shook. The fuse box exploded. Fuses literally shot across the room, with blue sparks and fire trailing behind. Outside, the chicken coop was flattened, the birds inside killed instantly. And in the snow behind the house, 3 fresh craters had appeared, each one a couple feet deep, surrounded by singed earth. Darren Bickford was a kid at the time, riding his bike down the road when it hit. He remembers it vividly. The world went quiet for a second. Then there was this blast, like a shotgun going off right next to me. A flash of light. And then the ground started to shake. He wasn't the only one who saw something strange. People across the island reported electrical damage. Blown out appliances, radios fried, wiring scorched. Some even said they saw glowing orbs in the sky. Within days, 2 scientists showed up from Los Alamos National Laboratory in the U.S., experts in solar activity and atmospheric energy. They weren't part of some secret mission, they said. They were there because their satellites had picked something up, anomalous readings from above Bell Island, something powerful. Their best explanation? A superbolt, an incredibly rare type of lightning strike that's hundreds or even thousands of times stronger than normal. Maybe even accompanied by ball lightning, which could explain the orbs. That theory made sense to the scientists. But on Bell Island, it didn't sit right. The weather hadn't been stormy. There were no clouds, no thunder, just that one deafening boom. And the damage was too focused, too bizarre. Rumors spread. Some said it was a secret military experiment, maybe something to do with electromagnetic weapons. Others thought it had to do with Bell Island's deep mines. Theories piled up, but no one could prove any of it. The Canadian government didn't say much. No follow-up, no official investigation. Just one of those things. Today, most scientists still point to that freak superbolt. That's the official line. And maybe that's all it was. Just nature doing something rare and unpredictable. But ask around Bell Island, and you'll still hear people talk about that day like it was something more. Something that felt different, bigger, and unsettling. June 7th, 1195, in Canterbury, England, was, by all reports, a beautiful summer day. No storms, no wind, just the calm rhythm of medieval life. Then something changed. From a clear sky, a dark, dense cloud rolled in, and from that one cloud, something strange began to fall. Not rain, and not ash. Gervase of Canterbury, a Benedictine monk and one of the most respected historians of his time, watched closely. And what he saw would baffle even scientists today. A strange white substance dropped from the cloud. And then it did something no one could explain. It formed into a glowing sphere. Suspended in midair, this orb hovered over the Thames, between the river and the Bishop of Norwich's lodging. And then, it moved. In Gervase's own words, written in Latin and carefully copied into his chronicles, a sort of fiery globe threw itself down into the river. With a spinning motion, it dropped time and again. This wasn't the first odd event Gervase had recorded, but it may have been the most unsettling. He wasn't prone to exaggeration. He was meticulous, skeptical, and deeply knowledgeable. His records of eclipses have since been verified to the day. So when he described what he saw, it wasn't idle rumor or fearful superstition. It was careful observation. Today, scientists believe what Gervase witnessed was likely ball lightning, a rare, still unexplained phenomenon where glowing orbs of energy appear during electrical storms, sometimes hovering, sometimes darting, sometimes even passing through walls or vanishing in water. The physics behind it remains mysterious even now. But what makes this record remarkable is that Gervase's account predates England's next confirmed case of ball lightning by almost 450 years. For a monk in 12th century England to witness, recognize, and describe such a phenomenon with that level of detail, it's not just a fascinating entry in an old chronicle. It's one of the earliest scientific observations of something that still puzzles us today. Whatever descended from the sky that day in Canterbury, Gervase wrote it down. And thanks to him, 8 centuries later, we're still wondering what it really was.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.